So, friends, good evening. We have an urgent live broadcast coming to you straight from Crimea. Kyiv is preparing to strike the Kerch Bridge. At least that's what Russian Z channels are hysterically writing about. And they're not writing this for no reason. The fact is, Ukraine has struck the Chonhar Bridge again. Oh, and Putin is already having a real meltdown over this. Anti-drone nets have been installed near the residence of the bunker dweller Valdai. They're probably afraid of Spider, Smokescreens 2.0 from the armed forces of Ukraine. Yes, we'll have plenty to discuss today. This is Project in the Crosshairs. I'm Vladimir Timoshenko, and we're getting started. I want to say right away, leave your comments under this broadcast, write your questions, and since we're live, we'll discuss everything online. So, let's start with temporarily occupied Crimea. There, let's just say it has its own atmosphere.
That's in Crimea.
I won't say exactly where, otherwise people will start telling me again.
People.
And here it feels completely safe for us right now. So I have to wonder, what about your situation? There's a strange buzzing sound coming from somewhere nearby. To be continued.
Well, that's quite telling. Yes, the armed forces of Ukraine are striking military targets on the temporarily occupied peninsula. In particular, this happened. Here's what. There are problems with the land corridor to Crimea. The AFU struck the Chonhar Bridge again. Traffic has been stopped. Abram, declared by the traitor to Ukraine named Saldo. I think you still remember him. The Chonhar Bridge, let me add this myself, is one of the key ones. It connects the temporarily occupied Crimea with the seized part of Kherson region. Military cargo, equipment, and supplies for the Russian group also pass through it in southern Ukraine. But here's the main point. Now pay attention. So where is the root of Russian fear? Russian war correspondents are understandably worried that the repeated strikes on the Chonhar Bridge are just the beginning of a large-scale operation by the Ukrainian armed forces to destroy the Crimean bridge. Listen to what the war correspondent from Komsomolskaya Pravda, Zifan Alexander Kots, writes. Is Kyiv preparing to strike the Crimean bridge? At the very least, that's what the logic of its recent actions suggests. On the night of July 7th, there was a drone strike on the Chonhar Bridge. What should we expect in the coming weeks? Strikes on the Armenian Perekop. Right now, all the Chonhar traffic is going there. Systematic attacks on the airfields and air defense of the peninsula. A large combined attack on the Kerch Bridge. Most likely timed to coincide with some political date or event, it seems that in Kyiv, they have seriously decided to impose a remote blockade of Crimea. Well, basically, that very Zed fanatic Kots is spot on. Our next segment is about how the armed forces of Ukraine are liberating Crimea from Russian filth.
Urgent! The bridge in Chonhar has been attacked again. The Ukrainian armed forces are cutting off the road to Crimea through Jankoy. We will share the details next. In Chonhar, the bridge has been damaged again after a nighttime attack by Ukrainian drones on the border with temporarily occupied Crimea. Gauleiter Vladimir Saldo complained that after the nighttime attack by Ukrainian drones, the bridge near the settlement of Chonhar was damaged again. According to him, air defense allegedly shot down 20 drones as they approached the bridge and traffic is once again blocked. Relevant services are working at the scene. He advised drivers to use alternative routes through Armyansk and Perekop. Z Publics are writing that right now someone is trying to take out the bridge. The Telegram channel Crimean Wind also reported on the attack in Jankoy on June 9th. The Chonhar Bridge is one of the key routes connecting occupied Crimea with the seized part of Kherson region. Military cargo, equipment and supplies for the Russian group in southern Ukraine pass through it. Now essentially, for the occupiers, the road to Crimea through Jankoy has been cut off. As the Telegram channel Real War writes, if the second checkpoint is also hit, the only route to occupied Crimea will be via the Crimean Bridge, which has long been a legitimate target for the Ukrainian armed forces. This is already the second attack on Chonhar in the past couple of days. On June 6th, UAV operators from the 3rd Regiment of Special Operations Forces took aerial control over part of the occupiers' land route to Crimea. On June 7th, Vladimir Saldo, Russia's appointee in the occupation administration of Kherson region, stated that, as a result of a nighttime UAV attack, the bridge deck near the settlement of Chonhar was damaged.
Friends, this is an important moment right now. Subscribe to Union to know the truth about what is happening in Ukraine, in the rest of the civilized world, and, as they say, in the abyss that is modern Putin's Russia. And by the way, speaking of the Russian abyss, against the backdrop of the successes of the armed forces of Ukraine in Crimea, and not only in Crimea, Putin is maniacally afraid for his own skin. Anti-drone nets have appeared on the highway 9 kilometers from Putin's residence in Valdai. One of the experts suggests that this is an attempt to protect the Russian ruler from a repeat operation by Ukrainian special services. Clearly, the Kremlin terrorists are afraid of a repeat of the Putin special operation. They're afraid of Putina 2.0. The appearance of nets over truck parking lots in the Valdai region of Novgorod Oblast was reported on the evening of June 7th by journalist Oleg Kashin. These nets are installed approximately 9 kilometers from Vladimir Putin's official residence in Valdai. This is confirmed by the agency's analysis. Such nets are installed on the front lines, and they are capable of protecting against small UAVs or munitions dropped from drones. Let me remind you that for Operation Putina, random truck drivers were hired who were given an order to deliver portable cabins to a specific location, park there, and then wait for a call from the client. When the truck drivers arrived at the designated spot and parked, the portable cabins suddenly came to life. Their roofs would open and drones would begin to take off from there, flying toward military airfields. And this time they're afraid in the bunker that Putin's very own residence might end up being in the place of those airfields. Let's take a closer look and analyze how the nasty little Putin is afraid. Let's watch the story.
Putin fears for his life. Journalists have published unique photos of anti-drone nets in Valdai. Why did the dictator's security turn off street cameras in Moscow, and how does the West know about it? We'll tell you everything right now. Anti-drone nets have apparently appeared on the highway 9 kilometers from Putin's residence in Valdai. They were spotted above truck parking lots in the Valdai district of the Novgorod region, reported journalist Oleg Kashin, citing a subscriber. Such nets are installed on the front lines, and they are capable of protecting against small UAVs or munitions dropped from drones, military analytics agencies told the publication. However, these nets do not protect against hits from large strategic UAVs such as the Lyuty. According to experts, in theory, a drone with an operator could fly even under such a net. However, this would require a signal relay nearby with a connection via Starlink. Experts believe that this is the only known case of Ukrainian remotely operated drones being used at such a distance from the border, Operation Web. At that time, the drones were secretly assembled inside wooden cabins which were placed on truck platforms. These cabins were equipped with solar panels and batteries to maintain autonomous communication with Kyiv. According to the news agency, anti-drone nets near Putin's palace appeared right after Operation Web on panoramas from the Russian service Yandex Maps and on a satellite image available on Google Maps. Both are dated 2025. In early May, Western intelligence leaked to the media that the FSO had tightened security measures around Putin and that he, among other things, had stopped traveling to Valdai. It also became known that in Russia, the security services disabled one of Putin's security systems after the assassination of Khamenei. This was reported by the Financial Times, citing two informed sources. The reason for the temporary shutdown of the system was information that Israeli intelligence had hacked surveillance cameras on the roads of Tehran, and for years had been receiving data from them. This helped determine the whereabouts of Ali Khamenei for his elimination at the end of February. A Ukrainian hacker who claims he is not connected to the Ukrainian authorities told the publication that the surveillance cameras near the Kremlin are still operating and are regularly being hacked. The publication noted that similar tools are definitely available to the US and the UK, who regularly provide Ukraine with data for strikes. The leak of information to the West about the shutdown of cameras in Moscow was not accidental, writes the Telegram channel Kremlin Snuff Box, citing a source in the Kremlin security services. He confirms that after the assassination of Kyiv, Russian security services temporarily disabled a special surveillance system used to protect Putin. But this is not only related to the assassination of Kyiv. As the channel writes, the surveillance system installed in Moscow and throughout Russia really does make it possible to learn a lot about the movements of a specific person, even Vladimir Putin. This simultaneously simplifies and complicates the work of the security services.
This is very sensitive information. Not everyone, even within the FSO, knows exactly how the president's security system is organized. The rivalry between the FSO and the FSB has not gone away.
Another source for the publication believes that the information was leaked by Putin's adversaries, trying to highlight the president's fear for his own life. The Independent noted that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has started to behave more and more strangely. At the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, he looked sick and puffy, and his statements about the war in Ukraine were far from the truth.
I would even say they were inadequate. And now, as promised, I'm reading your comments on this broadcast. User Max Saknovsky writes, I understand that Max himself is in Israel. He writes, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes, take care of yourselves. Ukraine was, is, and will be. Max, thank you very much. In fact, Ukraine was, is, and will be. If you are in Israel, we completely understand that things are very difficult for you right now as well. Therefore, we support the people of Israel in their fight against these Putin's friends from terrorist Iran. Friends, I keep saying for a reason that Putin is becoming more and more vicious every day. And here is a concrete case. A column was published in Rossiyskaya Gazeta with proposals to use tactical nuclear weapons and to eliminate President Zelensky. Russia is approaching the moment when the question of using tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield will arise. This is stated in a column by the so-called military expert Yuri Knutov, published in the government-run Rossiyskaya Gazeta. I would call it a rag, not a newspaper. Knutov also suggests giving Russian special services free rein so that they can, quote, eliminate the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Look at this horror. This terrorism is now openly called what it is in Russia. They're not even hiding it anymore. Everything is said directly. Well, let's move from the Kremlin's wet fantasies to the harsh Russian reality. Here's another hot and heated, very hot story. And, you know, it's a blazing fresh one in every sense. A targeted elimination in Moscow. This is the moment of the car explosion in the Moscow region in the Aviator micro-district in Balashikha, where the blast occurred. Originally, this area was built for Russian military personnel and their families. It was established on the site of a former military base. The apartments were allocated by the Ministry of Defense. Among the residents are military personnel and retirees, veterans, and families of servicemen. In this same district, in 2025, General Yaroslav Moskalik died during a car bombing. This is becoming a trend right now. And here's some fresh info in the car. In the car that exploded earlier this morning in Moscow, let's get back to the studio, friends. In that vehicle was a 62-year-old high-ranking lieutenant general who was serving in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. If this information is confirmed, this case will become the fourth elimination of such a high-ranking officer in the Russian rear during the war. This elimination could not be prevented, by the not-so-valiant the Russian FSB, valiant only in words, nor any security measures. None of it was up to the task. Well, now it's no wonder why Putin is starting to put up nets in Valdai, right? By the way, it's not just about the nets. Here's something else. After the assassination of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, Russian special services, for a while, disabled a special surveillance system that ensured the security of the so-called president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and other top officials of the state. As two informed sources told the Financial Times, the special services thoroughly checked the system, tried to isolate it from the internet as much as possible, and then turned it back on. This system operates separately from the nearly 300,000 cameras installed on the streets of Moscow. After Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed at the end of February, it was revealed that Israeli intelligence had hacked into surveillance cameras on the roads of Tehran, and for years had been receiving data and information from these cameras. This helped the Israeli military prepare the airstrike that resulted in the death of al-Khamenei. And you understand what the point is. In reality, Putin is afraid that the same scheme will be used against him. The scheme used to eliminate al-Khamenei. And Putin has good reason to be afraid. And anti-drone nets in Valdai definitely won't help him. And here, friends, there's something else as well. The leader of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is finally turning away from Russia. Here's what I mean. So Erdogan is betraying Putin with Ukraine. That's the punchy headline published by the New York Times. Turkey is increasingly helping Ukraine strengthen its position in the Middle East. And after the fall of Assad's regime in Syria, it is strengthening its own influence in the region. Ankara is no longer balancing between Moscow and NATO, but is gradually leaning toward Kyiv. The publication writes in more detail about Erdogan's new position, if it really exists, in our next segment.
Erdogan is turning away from Putin. Cooperation between Russia and Turkey is on the verge of breaking off. Ankara is strengthening its ties with Ukraine. Watch more about this in the following segment. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is winding down his partnership with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. As reported by the New York Times, Turkey is increasingly helping Ukraine establish new connections in the Middle East. Previously, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin had significant influence in this region, particularly in Syria. The article notes that the turning point in the partnership came when the regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad was overthrown, and Russia did not come to his aid. Since then, Ankara has increasingly leaned toward Kyiv. For example, in April of this year, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Syria for the first time to hold talks with the Syrian authorities and the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, during which issues of military and energy cooperation were discussed. In addition, Turkey has significantly reduced its purchases of Russian oil. As reported by Reuters in May, maritime imports of Russian Urals oil were reduced to their lowest level since the beginning of the year. The article notes that the decrease in imports occurred against the backdrop of a decline in oil supplies to the global market from the Persian Gulf countries. A source for the publication reports.
Turkey is used to buying Russian oil cheaply. They are not willing to pay such high prices for this grade.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will soon attend the NATO summit in Ankara, which will take place on July 7th through 8th. In addition to the expected meeting with Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Zelensky may also meet with US President Donald Trump. Both leaders have already confirmed their participation in the event, and Turkey has begun large-scale preparations to host the leaders of the alliance member countries.
And here is another extremely important topic. Will Abramovich chip in for Ukrainian air defense? Zelensky and Starmer seem to have already decided. We are waiting from the Russian oligarch, 2.4 billion euros. Let's go into more detail. So what I mean. Zelensky proposed using Abramovich's money to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. The Ukrainian president said he had discussed the matter with British Prime Minister Starmer. The issue concerns those very £2.4 billion from the sale of the Chelsea Football Club by the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, which could be directed towards strengthening Ukraine's air defense. Zelensky expressed the opinion that transferring the proceeds from the sale of Chelsea to Ukraine could help finance air defense systems, to shoot down those very Russian missiles that often strike Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Well, the background to this whole matter, I think you remember it perfectly well. Remember how, during that very shameful so-called International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, Putin supposedly casually mentioned that he had received a call from a local, that is a Russian oligarch, and said that he was being invited to Kyiv. Putin himself supposedly didn't know about it. Then Putin says, yes, go ahead, go to Kyiv, but I'm not the one actually sending you there. After that, of course, the press assumed that this oligarch was Roman Abramovich. In Kyiv, they confirmed, yes, in fact, a meeting between Zelensky and Abramovich did take place. President Zelensky announced this directly. But here's the problem. According to Zelensky, it was Abramovich himself who said that this meeting was strictly confidential. Supposedly, Putin didn't want this to become public. This whole story, why Putin ended up throwing Abramovich under the bus, is unclear. You know, over there in the bunker, it's such a mess that even the devil would get lost. Well, I mean Putin himself. But what's more interesting is something else. What role does Roman Abramovich actually play in the negotiation process right now? That's exactly what our next segment is about.
Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich came to a secret meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. The president of Ukraine officially confirmed the visit. What message did the businessman convey from Putin, and what did he discuss with the Ukrainian leader? More in the report. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has confirmed for the first time a meeting with Russian businessman Roman Abramovich in Kyiv. He spoke about this in an interview with Sky News. According to the Ukrainian leader, the oligarch came as an unofficial mediator in negotiations with the Kremlin.
He came to Kyiv. He said, I have a message directly for you, and I want to get a message from you to pass on to Putin. But he said that this needed to be done quietly, without any publicity.
Zelensky noted that the format of the meeting was not important to him. According to him, the main purpose of Abramovich's visit was to understand what steps Ukraine was willing to take regarding a peaceful settlement. In his conversation with the Russian businessman, the Ukrainian leader emphasized that Ukraine is not going to give up Donbass to Russia.
That was the key message. I said that we will not leave our territory. We will not give you victory in this way, and you will not achieve it.
Zelensky said that the conversation then turned to possible compromises. He told Abramovich that compromises are only possible after a ceasefire. The head of state also reiterated that he is ready to meet with Putin any day, in any format, on neutral territory except Russia and Belarus. As military political expert Alexander Musienko notes, according to Financial Times sources, as early as May, Zelensky conveyed a proposal for a meeting to Putin through Abramovich. It is noted that the message Zelensky conveyed to the Russian oligarch is similar to the open letter the Ukrainian leader addressed to the Kremlin chief.
Zelensky's move was to test how possible it would be to resume negotiations. And are we entering even the smallest negotiation format after Ukraine's successful strikes on the Russian oil complex? Or will we continue down the path of escalation?
The expert believes that Abramovich was chosen as a mediator for a reason. He recalls that, according to media reports, the Russian oligarch had already visited Ukraine in 2022.
Abramovich is the so-called representative of the business community in Russia. What do they call him in Russia? He is also responsible for other oligarchs, for the so-called big business.
Journalist Michael Naki believes that both Zelensky's letter to Putin and his conversation with Abramovich indicate that the Ukrainian leader is trying to convey his main messages not so much to the Russian dictator, but to the Russian elites.
Zelensky's letter was largely addressed not to Putin, everything is clear with him, but rather to the elites. To show them, look at what is happening to the country, look at what is happening to Russia, look, you are not winning. Moreover, the situation for you is starting to become much worse than it was before.
Meanwhile, the Telegram channel Ukraine Contact reports that on the eve of the meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Roman Abramovich, the head of the Servant of the People faction, David Arakhamia, held a closed-door meeting with the oligarch, during which he allegedly exchanged a few words with Putin as well. Only after that did the businessman have a personal meeting with Zelensky. As the Financial Times reminds us, Roman Abramovich assisted in mediating negotiations between Russia and Ukraine from the very first weeks of the full-scale war. He also helped broker an agreement that ensured the export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea. According to the publication's sources, the oligarch is still involved in prisoner exchanges and other bilateral negotiations with Ukraine.
Well, friends, this was the Pritzele project. Stay with us. We'll definitely see each other again soon. And subscribe to UNIAT. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Goodbye.